I see folks joining. Welcome. We're excited to get the chance to chat with everyone today. And I'm going to start really soon here and introduce you to some of our everybody that's sitting in front of you today. I'm talking to you from Detroit, Michigan this morning. Beautiful sunny day. I know folks are going to continue to join, so we're going to, kick it off with some introductions and hopefully have an engaging conversation that's as participatory as it can be, considering the format. So throughout, if you have any questions or for the group or thoughts, things that you wish you could ask if you were here in person, which we would have loved. Feel free to pop those questions into the chat. Our folks will, review them, and then we'll get the chance to answer some of those near the back half of the webinar today. So again, thanks for joining. I think we're going to record this webinar, so you can also, feel free to watch back and share in the future. So welcome again to everybody. We're really excited to have the opportunity to chat with you all today about our own personal stories in this beautiful place that we are. But I'm going to kick it off by asking the folks I'm sitting with here today to just all introduce themselves. I'll go last, I guess, because I'm holding the mic, but why don't we start all the way at the end with Kate? You can just say who you are, what you're up to here in the city, what you work on, and then we'll go from there. Oh, pass on it.
Awesome. Thanks, Hilary. Hi, everybody. My name is Kate Bell. My role currently, I'm the Deputy Director of Michigan's Community and Worker Economic Transition Office. It's a relatively new office in the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. The mission of our office is to ensure that communities, workers, and employers who are all feeling the impacts of economic transitions in both the automotive and utility sectors are given the resources and support they need, not only to navigate those transitions, but ultimately thrive in Michigan's future economy. Prior to that, I was serving as the policy director for the department, and I've had a number of different roles, both in Metro Detroit as well as Ann Arbor, since I moved to Michigan in 2018. I moved here from the East Coast. I was prior to moving to Michigan, I was living in Boston, Massachusetts, working in local government there. Wanted to increase my education. University of Michigan had a fantastic Master of Public Policy program, which is what I wanted to study. Came in 2018, graduated in 2020, height of the pandemic. Didn't stay only because of that, though. There were a number of job opportunities that were available in and around Southeast Michigan at the time. But I also met my life partner while I was studying at the university. She's a born and raised Michigander. She had already built her life here. I was happy to join in and make Michigan my home.
Awesome. Thanks.
We're happy you're here. Hi, I'm Kerry Duggan. I am the founder of Energy Security Partners, which is a strategic advisory firm based here in Detroit. We are working at the intersection of energy, climate, and environmental protection, and work on pragmatic solutions that are often very place-based and community enhanced economic development schemes. So very proud to be doing that work from here. I moved back here 8 years ago. I'm a native Michigander. I chose to live in Detroit proper. I always have to say that because folks are like, where exactly do you live? Out this window is the Detroit River, and I can see Canada. I was in DC for about 10 years prior to coming home. I was working at the White House and at the U.S. Department of Energy, and I'm just really proud of the work I did there. I was part of President Obama's Detroit Task Force, so I actually was back and forth quite a bit. I think my assistant counted I had my son strapped to my chest 52 times before he turned 2, and I'm just proud to be raising him here in Michigan. So I'm really glad all of you joined, and thanks for humoring me. But there was, I think, a really big appetite on my last visit to DC, particularly for my federal friends. And so I do hope we can get into opportunities for them to take a serious look, as well as talk about our own personal stories a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'm going to ask you a little bit about, the impetus for all of this too. But I'll finish up, I guess, on intros, so you all know who the heck you're talking to and can ask us questions. My name's Hilary Doe. I'm the Chief Growth Officer right now for the state of Michigan. The governor created that role in 2023, in the summer of 2023. And if you don't know what a Chief Growth Officer is, that makes sense because Michigan's never had one and no other state in the nation has one. But we do innovative, hard things here. So so we're taking this task on too. And the task at hand is to really think about our population growth trends in the state and make sure we're doing whatever it takes to retain our young folks and attract folks from across the country to come and join us here in Michigan. That has looked like a ton of listening to make sure we're building a policy agenda that's reflective of especially what our workers across the state and young talent really want in terms of places to live and opportunities. And I think we're making incredible progress there, as well as a lot of listening to continuing to build economic opportunity across the state, which like we'll talk about in a little bit, Michigan is in a wonderful position right now with 60,000 plus open jobs. And so part of the need for us to no longer be a best kept secret is because we want to really, for example, lead the fight against the climate crisis and help with filling those seats in such critical industries. And so we have to make sure everybody knows what we're up to here. But we'll get into, I think, some more of that later. Prior to this, I was born in Michigan and went to the University of Michigan for undergrad and grad school. But then, like Kerry, was a boomerang. I left the state and did all kinds of things. I lived in LA and Chicago and New York in particular for quite some time. I was in the public policy space, so maybe relevant to some of the folks on the webinar today. I was national director of a think tank for a long time, based in New York, and then pivoted and was actually in tech, running a tech company for a fair number of time. I was started out in a bunch of different roles there and ended up as the president of that company before I moved back to Detroit. Basically, as soon as I had the opportunity to move back, having walked around the country as a walking Pure Michigan commercial, I think for most of my adult life, and it's been so wonderful to get to be back. My husband, maybe like many of you, is from the East Coast and had no Michigan connection. And I remember being here for 3 days and he was like, oh, we're lifers. We're just, all in. So it's been really, really wonderful for our family. So excited to get to share all of that with all of you. So before we get into some of the substance, Kerry, you chatted with me about wanting to do this, and I was excited to have the opportunity. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, kind of, why this moment feels like the right moment to have this conversation and what you're hoping to make sure you can get the chance to share.
Thanks, Hilary, and thanks to the Growth Office for putting the webinar on. Well, I was in DC just a month ago now, and prior to that, I sort of signaled that I was going to be in Washington, and I'm not a social media guru. I'm a policy nerd like you, but I posted on LinkedIn, and my son looked at my whatever views, and he's like, Mommy, you went viral. So that was interesting, and we were also hosting an event, which I realized very quickly. We're hosting an event to talk about Michigan, because like you, it's one of my favorite things to talk about. And it was quickly oversubscribed to the point where I had to close it down. And I reached out to Hilary and the team. And I said, we have to do something more forward leaning. And you've said it already, best kept secret. There's so much we could talk about this place beyond just the job opportunities. It's quality of life. And I'm eager to always share that, because my own experience 8 years ago, I remember the first meal we went out to. You guys both lived on the East Coast. So we went out to Supino's Pizza in Eastern Market, the country's oldest open outdoor farmers market.
Love it. Fun fact.
Yes, I got lots of them. And I remember the bill came and I'm like, wow, okay. This is very affordable. So it just was dramatically different, and I'm happy to share all sorts of stuff, but I'll even tell you, it's not just me, my business partner, Todd Sanders, he's a native of Kentucky, and he moved back here. The wife bought the house sight unseen from Italy. They were stationed abroad. So he'd never been to Northern Michigan. They bought up in Traverse City on Old Mission Peninsula. Oh, beautiful. And so the story is after he decommissioned from the Marine Corps, he's coming up over that first hill on Old Mission and just tears down his eyes when he saw the view. So there's so much beauty here, quality of life. The people are the best part. I just, I live on the Riverwalk, the country's #1 Riverwalk, 3 years in a row. And something that's really different about Detroit than other places, you don't pass by anybody without nodding and acknowledging them. And I go to London, I'm like, man, they're all a bunch of jerks. It's nobody makes eye contact. It's very different. So there's some stereotypes about us in the Midwest that are true, and some I think we should probably break some myths.
Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
Well, that is such a fun and exciting impetus. I feel like all of us could talk about this all day. So I think the challenge will be making sure that we, remember we have a certain number of minutes and should answer your questions too. But hopefully all this is really helpful. So we already all spoke a little bit to, your story, kind of how you all got here. I don't know if you want to expound a little bit though on your why. So for example, the why you chose to stay in your case, or for us, why when as soon as I got a chance to move back, I did, or what have you, because I think there's so much richness there. Um, any of us could have chosen to live anywhere and stayed anywhere, and this was absolutely an affirmative, choice. It was because I thought there was something important and special, and my absolute best life, was here. And I think sometimes, speaking of misperceptions or myths, there's this sense that when you leave DC or New York or LA or something, you're inherently giving something up. And that just has not been my lived experience. It's been the opposite, honestly. So I guess I'm just curious if you want to dig in a little bit more to that, like why either of you want to start. Yeah.
So I've had the privilege of living really all over the country and abroad. And served in the Air Force. I was actually technically born in Michigan, but yeah, I'm technically a boomerang. My partner never lets me claim it though, because we moved away when I was 6 months old when the base closed. But I've had the privilege of living across the country and abroad, and home has always been where the Air Force sent us or where my family lived. I've never felt attached to one particular place really in my life. There's been beauty across the country, there's been beauty abroad, but I never felt a sense of community like what I felt living in Michigan. That was something that was really important to me. I'd built up a really solid community of folks I went to grad school with. But, graduation happens and people start dispersing. And when it came time for me to make the decision as I'm job hunting of where I want to go, really anywhere I wanted in the country, I could have chosen. I made the decision to stay in Michigan in part because of the community that I had built and that I continued to grow here. My community in Detroit is probably the most solid of any that I've experienced. We have a WhatsApp chat of like 70 people, some of whom you're closer to than others, obviously, but it's really any ask out to that group and you're met with such warmth and really anyone at the drop of a hat is willing to help you out. And there's been friendships elsewhere that I've lived, but this holistic sense of community is something I haven't experienced. A lot of it shows up in fun ways, like people who are willing to plant their roots here through homeownership opportunities. A lot of my friends who've come from either coast have not been able to pursue that because the cost of living was so high. Not only are they able to plant their roots here, but there's an active collaboration among people to help with those house projects. There's actually a chat now for people to sign up for every weekend for the next couple months we're going to do our garden beds this month, or we're going to, demolish some stuff in a new house that we're remodeling. And it's just that type of tight-knit community that exists here that I have not experienced anywhere else. I felt a taste of it when I was in grad school, a little bit of it, in the friendships that I developed that first year out of grad school, but it's just blossomed beyond anything else that I've experienced elsewhere. I've lived in my apartment over on the southwest side of the city longer than I've lived anywhere else in my life. 5 years now. And that's a purposeful choice. And I hope others also decide to make it, because I could just go on, so I'll stop now.
That is awesome. Well, you talk a little bit about the cost of living and community. Maybe for me, I'm a single parent, so that has its challenges and opportunities. For me, I really wanted my son to have the Great Lakes experience that I did. So like many Metro Detroit families coming up, we spent a lot of time in Canada, which is literally right there. And we had a cottage on Lake Erie. So I grew up very much with a huge family on the lake, and that's fundamentally how I got into my field, is just having that as my backdrop. And I really wanted that for my son. So what I love about this place is I can rotate around. It's like 9 hours from one end of the state to the other. It's a huge state. I don't think most people appreciate that. But I split my time a bit between Detroit, Traverse City. I have a farm up there, which is a hobby farm, and the UP, where I have a cabin on an inland lake 10 minutes south of a Great Lake. It's a wonderful way to experience the state in all 4 seasons. And if you like to ski and do outdoor stuff, we've got that for you. If you like I mean, anything. And then I've also mentioned in some of my posts, like when it is snowy here and I'm downtown, we have the country's #1 athletic club, which is where I spend a lot of my time. And to your point on community, I have made friends through that network that have become like my best friends and my walking buddies. But something you said earlier caught me. Like when I moved back here, I was nervous about giving something up in DC. So I created a group of DC plus people. So people who I knew chose Michigan or were boomerang back. And that list is about like 150 people. And pre-pandemic, we would get together once a month at an establishment, a watering hole somewhere in the city, kind of like DC style happy hours. So I created that for myself and I have great friends as a result. And again, it is a community that you can call on. And this kind of conversation, I think, is one that'll be appealing to them to help any of the folks on the line who are thinking about Michigan.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And I think that's one of the things that's been so exciting and compelling about being here. Folks are so enthusiastic about their place generally, right? And are like willing to, when someone moves in, take them under their wing and show them all the things and be a great mentor and support when folks are making life transitions between jobs and things like that. And that's not a given, when I loved Brooklyn. That's where I spent most of my time when I was before I boomeranged back. We really enjoyed our life there. I had my first child there. We had a good life. But my experience was that I missed community, which is so ironic because there's so many people everywhere. Obviously it's so densely populated, but we just weren't. I didn't meet my neighbor. You know what I mean? It wasn't that kind of experience that I've had since I've been back. And my experience was that I didn't actually, when I moved back, give much, or if anything, up at all. Because we were in Brooklyn for so long, one thing I really prized was walkability. I think one of the myths to bust is that you can't find that life here, and you absolutely can. I mean, I live on the east side. We had been in a tiny 800 square foot apartment for a really long time with my husband, myself, our dog, a child. I was pregnant. I was like, there's too many mammals and too few square feet. I was losing it a little bit. So when we moved here, we bought this, historic home in a really beautiful historic neighborhood on the east side here called Indian Village, and renovated it. And I found, oh gosh, all of a sudden we've got this beautiful house and we're able to own a home, which we were never able to do in New York, and wanted to do that. Big yard, all the things, but I could still walk to a coffee shop and walk to great Italian food and walk to hot yoga. And you know what I mean? All of that was still present. I didn't know, honestly, how bougie it would be that we, have whiskey and bacon restaurant in my neighborhood. You know what I mean? It felt very Brooklyn. And frankly, the first few couples I met had all moved from Brooklyn or LA, looking for something like a little bit more space, but still a really serious like city experience, which is what I wanted. And we can load our kids up on the bike and be downtown in 8 minutes. And to speak just one more second to that city piece, because it was so important to me, or for our family, Detroit is one of the great American cities, and that's still true. But I think people realize it was true long ago as well. That besides Ellis Island, there wasn't a place that was the stopping point for more folks than coming through Michigan Central in Detroit. So we have this really diverse, wonderful community here, and because we were so fast growing and so large for so long, we have these incredible big city amenities. So like a great opera house that's like jaw-droppingly beautiful, and beautiful theaters, and more theaters than anywhere except Broadway or something. I think that's the stat. Great, all the sports teams, all 4 sports teams downtown. I'm a big basketball nerd, so we have season tickets and go to basketball games all the time. And all of that stuff, of course, was present in New York, but we just didn't use it. By the time I got back to Brooklyn at the end of the night, I didn't want to get on the train and load everybody up for 45 minutes, and everything's more expensive. And we just didn't, I don't know, it was almost one of those aspirational things. My aspiration was to live that life, but I wasn't doing it. And here my experience is that we get to use those incredible amenities, like this incredible symphony and all the things that we have, the beautiful Riverwalk, all of that, but they're very accessible and very available to us in this wonderfully rich like fabric of community I wasn't able to find in those other places. So I too could go on, and we'll stop because I'm probably being boring. But how cool is it to be in a place where everyone wants to talk about it and loves where they're from? Okay, so when we in my role, we spent a lot of the last 18 months traveling the state and talking to folks across the country about what they're looking for in a place to call home. And what we found is that folks want great places. Place is critical. Great opportunities, of course, jobs or educational opportunities, and really welcoming communities. That means something different for everybody, but people, want to feel like a local quickly or want to feel like they are welcome and their neighbors are welcome. All three of those pillars showed up time and again in all of our work. I don't know if we've talked a lot about community. We'll pivot into jobs and all of that in a second, but I don't know if there's one of those pillars or story you have about one of those pillars, great places, great opportunities, or welcoming communities that you think really shone for you, not necessarily just in Detroit, in Ann Arbor, in Grand Rapids, like one of the fastest growing regions in our state, in Traverse City. The remote workers from across the country moved to Traverse City over the last couple of years. So it's one of the fastest growing places per capita as well. So beautiful. I understand why your colleague cried when maybe it's incredibly beautiful, all the wine and everything up there. I don't know if you have, something you could share on one of those pillars, that knowing that people need great places, great opportunities, and welcoming communities.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about my work life all day long, but I'd rather talk about my not work life. I love being outside. I'm an enviro inherently. That's both of my degrees. And Michigan's outdoor recreational opportunities are unmatchable. So I'm a city girl down here. I'm a farmer up north. I can go hiking in the UP, but the accessibility of those resources is pretty amazing. It could be a really long car ride, but I have to say this before we lose time, but we have the country's least visited national park in the entire system, which is also the country's most revisited. So if you go there once to Isle Royale up in the UP, you're hooked. And I think there's so many gems that a lot of Michiganders, a lot of trolls, the people that live downstate, under the bridge, if you know what I'm talking about, don't get up to. And so I would just encourage anybody that's coming here for the first time, don't skip over the UP. Because the quality of life, the critters that you're going to see up there, it's too much fun. So again, I could talk about scaling climate technology. We have that here. We are a leader. Good. Okay. I'm going to pass the mic.
I mean, I touched on the community piece already a bit, but I feel it just bears repeating for me personally. But that does tie into the place itself. So I think just the people that you will meet here, you can find basically who are willing to do almost any activity that you want to do. Kerry had touched on the outdoor rec opportunities. One of the great joys of my life is ice skating on open ice. When it's cold enough, I can go over to Belle Isle, which is a beautiful city park that is an island. It has beaches, but it also has, a bunch of trees for like great hiking opportunities. You could take your dog. When it freezes over, I can skate in the canals. I can play pond hockey. And there'll just be a bunch of people who are willing to come out and like they'll bring their blow torches to Zamboni the ice and make it skatable, have like mini tournaments, just completely impromptu. They're not, officially sanctioned or anything. You can do that. But if you're also not someone who wants to spend their time in 10-degree weather outside for that long, there's so many opportunities for you to just take advantage of here. For me, how it's tied into place is that the people that I've met here are actively giving back into the places that they are living. It's not just, oh, great, I'm finally able to buy a house. I'm going to stake my claim here and then not, worry about building the rest of the community up. There have been so many, just from minor improvements to people in my neighborhood in Southwest Detroit who are actively trying to trap, neuter, and release cats so that there's not an over cat population, but on their own time, to community gardening, to broader activism opportunities. I think that there really is just this commitment to the community writ large outside of like the people that you meet and that you build friendships with. I don't necessarily know the names of all of my neighbors on my block, but we know of each other and are able to look out for each other and share opportunities. One guy who works at the park near my house saw me playing hockey on Belle Isle. We recognized each other one day. And he, as we were walking in our neighborhood a couple weeks later, recognized my face and invited me to a hockey tournament that was happening near my house and, offered opportunities for volunteering and things like that. So it really is this commitment to the community. And this is on a micro scale. I'm talking about blocks in neighborhoods in a city. But I found a similar thing for, communities larger than that, or even the state. as a whole. I think that there really is, as diverse of a state as we are, as big of a state as we are, there is this pride in being a Michigander, and people are willing to do a lot to build up the communities, and they want to see the state thrive.
So you all talked about what community and place. I'll speak for a second to opportunity, and then I'm going to make everyone else do it too, because there's so much opportunity here to talk about. And I know folks are interested in, roles that are available and things like that. And I also think there's some myths to bust in that regard as well about how diverse our economy is and some of the things about in that area. But a big part of my life has been about entrepreneurialism, as you are an entrepreneur. And I didn't think about the extent to which Detroit and Michigan more broadly would be such a wonderful, home cradle for entrepreneurship before I moved. But that has absolutely been my experience. And one of the first ways I noticed it was in small business. So I would bump into neighbors, say like I said, I've met a handful of people when I first moved who moved from Brooklyn or LA or whatever. And they said part of the reason they moved was they're a consultant during the day, for example, but they also own a barber shop or whatever, here in Detroit, or they, work at a big company in the private sector, but they own a bakery, those kinds of things. And I just felt like to each his own. But for me, I was so struck by, oh my God, that's so idyllic, because I had lived for so long in big, more expensive city. You just can't actually do that. You might have said, oh, I wish I could someday become a bake bread or something, but that wasn't going to happen. How are you going to afford a storefront or, what have you? But here, I feel like there's so many people who are able to express their creativity in those ways and build these like really holistic, whole lives that are sort of more representative of everything that they are, and that was really inspiring to me. My entrepreneurship or I guess has been in social entrepreneurship in the public policy space, but then also in tech. And so one of the, I think, gems in our place is our incredible fast growing startup ecosystem here in Michigan. Michigan has the second fastest growing startup and innovation ecosystem in the country, which is really exciting. And its root, I think, is here in Detroit and Ann Arbor, but there's incredible blue tech innovation happening in Traverse City, for example, with obviously 20+% of the world's fresh water. And so they're able to test drones and things like that in environments that you never could anywhere else. So I'll just say there's innovation everywhere. But here, one group I always like to talk up because I met their founder, Johnny Turnage, before he started this when I was, just helping him out as in a community way as an advisor or whatever, just being, nice. They started something called Black Tech Saturdays, which has fast become the premier Black and brown tech ecosystem in the country. And on a given Saturday, you can show up and there's 700 to 1,000, Black and brown founders who are, building incredible companies, and you can't be present in that space and not know that this is the place that's going to solve our biggest challenges. That's they're taking on and tackling all kinds of things, obviously, but once in a while, I feel like every time I show up, I bump into someone who I'm like, oh my God, I just can't, I'm bowled over by the innovation and the, sort of scale and fast growth that's possible here. And so for folks who are so inclined, I'd say that capacity for creativity and entrepreneurship in this place is just unmatched in my experience. Again, having been in California and all the other places. Okay, so I'm bragging now. I'm going to stop. Okay, so speaking of great opportunities, I'm curious if you all could speak a little bit to some of the industries that you think are really exciting and critical to our place and the kinds of jobs and roles, therefore, that might be available to folks. I mentioned, I think this is one of those myths to bust. Folks don't necessarily know. I don't know how often you all may have heard of folks who don't know anything about Michigan. Oh, it's just cars or something. And it's never been just cars. It's always been innovation. And that includes incredible mobility innovation, but also a bunch of other things. Yeah. And it's part of the reason those fast growing industries, we know we have to tell our story so that we can fill those seats and continue leading the country and the world in some of those really important industries. So I don't know if you can speak to that.
And maybe I'll thread the needle here from something that you said about the ability to have an impact here. I still think Detroit and Michigan, you can have an outsized, unmatched impact here that you can't in other places in New York. Yeah. And I think part of that is the accessible community. We are friendly. That is a true story. But even I think about, some of our key community leaders. Doug Song is a great example. He is an accessible billionaire who is bullish on the Michigan Founders Fund and really, really supportive to community members and entrepreneurs. And I just feel really lucky in that way, because I don't think that's universal. Yeah. But in terms of growth industries, a couple of things, not to get Debbie Downer, but you guys know I'm a climate person. We do have some serious advantages. Hilary mentioned 21% of the world's fresh surface water is here. I feel like that is not well understood, what that actually means for a very thirsty planet. So that's thing one. Thing two is a big portion of our state is north of the 45th parallel. From a climate policy advisor perspective, that's a really good place to live. I'm not saying anywhere's perfect. People don't like when you call places a climate haven, but we do have a relative advantage to other places in the world. So I'm flagging those. As a mom, for me, it is existential. I think about the long-term livability of where we are. To that point, I also focus on solutions. So I'm focused on scaling climate technology companies, landing and expanding here. And I get a call a week from a company that just discovered Michigan and all those things I just said. And so that's what we spend a lot of our time doing as a scale-up partner. I'll give you two examples here. I happen to know Luxwell. I was just looking at their jobs site this morning. They are hiring, Luxwall. It's a vacuum insulated glass technology. Really sexy stuff, guys. Windows. But they can take your hyper inefficient windows to maximum efficiency. It's a company that's growing and expanding in red parts of the state and blue parts of the state, and they are hiring right now. Another company that we support is called Our Next Energy, based out of Novi, but also expanding in the energy storage battery space. They broke the world record on miles traveled on a single EV charge, 752 miles. They went from Detroit around the Capitol to the UP, the Mackinac Bridge, and back without having to stop. And the two ICE vehicles that were recording the trip had to stop twice. So there are neat things happening in this space. Two that we support. There's more on our website, Energy Security Partners. You can look it up there. But I'm not waiting for these opportunities, Hilary. We're going after them. That's a lot of the reason why I'm going around the country, is finding these folks and bringing them here. And then, as you said, lifting up the community that is here. I love Black Tech Saturdays. I think it is one of the coolest things about this place and the people. When you talk about one person with two people, Johnny and Alexa, with an idea, you quickly can find the support you need in your community and make big swings. And that's what I think we all need right now, particularly in the climate moment. So Debbie Downer's going to pass the mic.
I don't know how you follow up on that. So I think obviously mobility is a huge part of the state's economy still, right? Automotive is. But I think as Kerry and Hilary had said, it's more than that. Michiganders are just really good at building things, I think, regardless of what that thing is. I forget the exact numbers, but the population of our engineers is one of the highest. Graduate 4 times higher engineers than any other state. I think like engineers per capita is among some of the highest. I forget exactly what it is, but we just have people who are good at building. And that goes beyond just building auto. We're talking about some of the hard tech stuff that's helping on the blue tech or green tech space. Michigan has a 2040 clean energy standard that we have to hit, and 2040 is coming up pretty quickly in just 15 years. To meet that moment, our utilities across the state are going to have to, deploy some of the technology to help meet that. And there are opportunities to build some of that emerging technology that's going to be, more reliable, faster, cheaper, whatever. There are opportunities starting to percolate now to build that here. So I think if you want to build something, if you're excited about building something, Michigan is a great place to come do that. Some of the other opportunities, honestly, I'm in the public policy space. A lot of my work in the past has been in community and economic development. And I think that there is such an appetite at the community level or regional level for people who are serious about building great places and ultimately cultivating a prosperity economy across the state. So if you're in the public policy space, if you're in the community economic development space, there are opportunities for, regional economic development organizations at the local government level. There are opportunities to come and take these places that are already so strong and so rich and have historical significance and build them to be the types of place that's going to foster prosperity for not just 2025, but looking ahead to 2020 or 2040 and beyond. I just think that there is such an appetite. There are opportunities out there in all pockets of the state. And as Kerry has talked about at length already, every pocket of the state has such beauty in it, has such amazing opportunities for recreation, really anything that you want there. So I think just something that you're interested in, you are likely going to be able to find it here.
There's like so much in all of that that I sort of want threads I want to pull on. So I'm struggling to organize my thoughts. But I guess one thing that you mentioned, I want to follow up on quickly, Kate, which is because we may have folks, from the public sector or, the public policy space or what have you. One thing that's true about this moment in Michigan, you mentioned we have this, clean energy or carbon, neutrality standard we have to meet rather. We don't have to, but we decided as a state that we were going to set one of the most ambitious, create one. My Healthy Climate Plan was passed here, and we passed one of the most ambitious pieces of climate legislation in the country. And I mention it because I think in the same way that there are these myths about what you might give up or whatever, there's also, I think, not enough recognition of the leadership that Michigan has shown from a policy perspective. Maybe in part because we're stewards of 20% of the world's fresh water, or because, we have so many outdoor lovers, and that has always been such a critical part of our lifestyle, conservation, what have you. I don't know. But it was possible here. It was politically possible in what is seen to be a purple state to do something ambitious and bold like that, like the My Healthy Climate Plan. And then to chop 10 years off of it and say, hey, instead of reaching 100%, neutrality by 2050, we'll do it by 2040. You know what I mean? It's just, we do these, I'm inspired consistently by the big, bold swings that folks are taking here. And again, I just don't think they're as well known. So there's that. There's, of course, the Elliott-Larsen Act and all the ways that we've protected and enshrined folks' rights here. I think that's critical when we talk about welcoming communities and reproductive health access, all those things. But then there's also, in the last year and a half or so, on the back of some of, great work that's happened across the state. We knew that some of the things we needed to do in order to retain and attract talent were make sure folks had access to post-secondary opportunity and education, make sure folks had access to childcare, some of these critical things that the whole country is really struggling with, housing. And Michigan's led the way on those, has managed to get more housing stock online than almost any other state, has passed free community college for every high school student in their first year, has made available universal pre-K for all 4-year-olds in the state. I mean, those are these big policy victories, and they're happening quickly because I think, we're showing that it's possible to work on, some shared prosperity together, to look ahead, decide what kind of place we want to be, and accomplish really big, compelling, inspiring to me things. I don't know if that triggers anything for either of you. I don't want to put you on the spot, but just from a policy perspective as a wonk, I just think that's so inspiring. So, yeah.
Brag point.
Yes.
That's why we're here. We're a top 5 climate state.
Yes.
And as a person with my background, I am yelling and screaming that everywhere I go, because it is really important. The humility of the Midwestern folk, it's not really like us. This is abnormal behavior to be this bullish, but I do think we have to have a bit of gumption around this, particularly from, building resilience right now. And we have the policy tools, we have great technical expertise. You mentioned the amount of engineers, but we need more. We need more of you. And I know we're going to talk about, various portals and things you can look at. Another person, your colleague, Jonathan Smith, who's a dear friend. I've done a lot of work with Jonathan Smith from Leo. He's another boomerang, came back here. And he's been posting some places to meet if you're a policy person. So I'd encourage you to look up Jonathan Smith online. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What was the question? Yeah, pass or bat. Okay, well, we can get to some of those sort of resources and things for folks, but I wanted to just create a little bit more space for last questions about opportunities and anything you want to share before we give folks the direct resource links. One thing that comes to mind for me is you were mentioning about your sector and the climate space. Just again, I'm getting so many calls today. I'm very popular. If you move to Detroit, you're going to get a lot of invitations. No, I'm kidding. So I mentioned at the beginning that part of the reason that it matters so much, of course, to retain our folks here and build places folks want to be is for quality of life and shared prosperity, but also that there's some urgency around that for us, in the same way that, We love to build things, and we've always stepped up when there are global problems to solve. I think that's one of the things I've always found so compelling about our place from the arsenal of democracy, forward right now in this, moment where we have a global climate crisis. Michigan did everything we could to pull down federal resources when they were available, and we were more successful at that than other states. We're the most IRA-backed clean energy projects in the country, and this, therefore, the fastest growing clean energy job sector in America. Our energy job sector is growing at 2 times the rate of U.S. employment right now, and the whole country really, therefore, is rooting for Michigan, right? Like, in order for us to be successful at tackling these big global challenges, Michigan has to be successful. That's the position that we find ourselves in. And so, again, can't be that best kept secret. Need to fill some of those seats. And there are just a wealth of these innovative startup jobs, jobs in the public sector, jobs in the policy space, and in these critical industries. So whether you love that Michigan's climate resilient and not a climate haven necessarily, no one is, but as good as you get in that regard. I think it's never been enough for us that's not sufficient. And we've been fighting for a long time to make sure we're also the tip of the spear and leading the fight against the climate crisis. And that's something I just want folks to know they can do here. So that's your thing, but I just decided to share it.
We are united on that. You and I came up with a phrase for it: decarbonize the world from Michigan.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
See, we're going to make t-shirts after this, so we'll also point you in that direction. Okay, so I'm going to share just a couple resources, and then we can start to get to your questions. We also have just a couple more lifestyle questions if we have time for them. So in addition, yes, look up Jonathan Smith. He's a colleague to many. And Michigan policy leaders is what they're calling it. Okay. And he's created this wonderful resume bank where folks can drop resumes for consideration and be part of that community here. I'd also suggest, because we've been doing this talent work for some time, we have pretty advanced, I guess, like infrastructure to try to welcome folks to Michigan and help connect you to great job opportunities. So you can visit michiganlife.org, and there's a job portal there with access to, I think, over 100,000 jobs on that portal now that you can check out and see if there's anything that you want to apply to. You can also, on that site, check out all the different regions of the state, whether you're a city mouse like me and you like, a big city, or you want to be on the west side and be closer to Chicago. Grand Rapids is so beautiful. Lake Michigan is stunning. The number of people who've seen Lake Michigan for the first time and their jaw drops and they say, that's a lake. You have to convince them there's no sharks in it.
Tell them you can't see across our lakes.
Yeah, no, you can't see across them. You can't see the other side. It looks like an ocean. There you go. But it's freshwater. So whether it's Grand Rapids or, Traverse City or the UP, there's little quizzes on there and things like that where you can kind of see what place might suit you in our state, and also be connected to regional partners in those places. So if place is primary for you, you can start from a place, or you can start from a jobs and opportunities place through the jobs portal as well. And we have a whole talent action team and a growth office here who are excited to try to welcome folks to the state. So feel free to reach out to any of us. We'll do our best to be connectors, as everybody sitting here, I think, is a connector and happy to be helpful whenever we can. So I know we're getting close to the time of questions. I don't know if there are some in there that we want to start fielding. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Experience and other skills to plug into some of our local and state both government roles.
Yep.
I think regional EDO work is important here. So probably
Yeah.
would be helpful for them to see how they may be able to retool some of those skills
Yeah.
to find an opportunity in Michigan.
Okay.
They wanna repeat
Yeah,
it.
I'll repeat it. Yeah. I know that we don't have mics everywhere, so I'll repeat the question. So folks were asking who have international or international development or international economic experience, how they can maybe apply those skills here in Michigan, what opportunities might be available to them. We like to talk about our international border crossings here because people forget that that's not maybe what you're talking about. So I can turn it over to my fellow panelists and speak a little bit to how to maybe retool some of those skills and apply them to some of the problems folks are solving here and some of the exciting opportunities in regional or state government.
That is a great question, and you are welcome here. I think, particularly from USAID, I mean, we are an agricultural state as well, so just keep that in mind. I would point you to wonderful Michiganders like Bob Sutherland, who owns Cherry Republic, and some of the community that's involved in the 1% campaigns up in Traverse City area. However, the governor just came back from a visit to the UK and Ireland this last week. Yeah, last week. And she recently was in UAE as well and established an MOU between one of the Emirates and the state of Michigan. I'm just saying these things because I think there is opportunity from a policy and economic development place for subnational global opportunities. I'm an advisor to a group here, an NGO called Global Ties Detroit, where we welcome visitors from all around the world. I would suggest that you plug into groups like that. They obviously have a DC headquarters, but they have a Detroit place here. There is a vast community of folks in Detroit that are focused on international. We also have consuls here and honorary consuls. We are close to Chicago, which hosts quite a bit. And then there's just global networks to pay attention to. One of my other favorite Michiganders is a woman named Deanna Callahan, who is the executive director of Great Lakes Endeavor. I'm a mentor in that network. So those are all growth stage companies, and it is a global network, usually focused on emerging markets and growth stage entrepreneurs. So there's a wealth of opportunity, and we're just going to help provide the clues so you can find your way in to meet them.
I'll just reiterate Michigan policy leaders, the resume bank that my boss Jonathan Smith is cultivating would be a great thing to, plug that in. There's so many skills, even if it's not necessarily diplomacy related, that are obviously going to be transferable to a lot of the problems that we're solving here in Michigan. Kerry touched on a lot of the, development style opportunities, but Michigan is a very diverse state, is also has a number of various immigrant populations across the state, a number of refugee populations in enclaves across the state. There are many organizations who are working with those groups in a number of different capacities. So if your work was focused on, anything related to food or agriculture, there are opportunities there. If it was related to housing, there are opportunities there as well. So I wanted to flag that in addition. And that's, again, all over the state. It's not just Southeast Michigan focused. You can go further up north to the west side of the state, and you will find many of those opportunities as well.
And I just suggest from like a resource perspective, if you, for example, look through the jobs portal or look through what's available in that resume bank that we've been talking about and don't see what you're looking for, feel free to reach out and folks can help you navigate. Because, fundamentally, we're talking about this being a place where folks are solving big problems. And I would say the eyes of the world are on Michigan in so many different ways because of our natural resource availability, because of our leadership in critical industries. And we also have, what do they say? Michigan's like a microcosm of the country, right? We have a lot of, the same opportunities and challenges. And so there's just so many innovative, creative folks who've chosen Michigan as the place to launch their thing, to try their pilot. It's like a petri dish for, I think, incredible ideas. And so if there's a problem you're trying to solve, inevitably, there's an incredible organization that's like really like working on that problem as it manifests in our country as well. And so I think that's, there's just no lack of inspiring folks. So we could go on and on. Yeah.
One thing to mention, just piggybacking off of that, is we have 4 R1 research universities too. So it's important for you to know that. So it's Wayne State here in Detroit, University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan State University in East Lansing, and Michigan Tech up in Houghton, Michigan. So as you want to be around those kinds of communities, I would encourage you to look at our R1s because it's pretty awesome. I don't know how many states have 4 R1s.
Yeah. No, we do have an awesome number of R1s. And a bunch of them do this kind of work. I'm a Ford School graduate, so shout out to the Ford School. All right. Yeah. Who knew? Okay, we just found each other here. Okay, is there something else you'd like to add? Y'all had? Yeah. Yeah.
Area, which we could do a lot for. So I think that would be helpful to touch on quickly.
Yeah. Totally. I'm sure all of us could speak to this in different ways. But the question was, what's the state doing from the perspective of supporting and helping grow the tech sector and our innovation ecosystem? And the answer is a lot. And also that there's a lot more to come, I'd say, which is, I think, really important. This might sound squishy, but I'm going to start here, actually. I think that the one thing that sets us apart from many places I've lived is that there is a lot of you were mentioning this with access to Doug Song and things like this, but access to funders and investors, access to other founders, like, even very accessible CEOs at very big companies, because of, I think, this communitarian sense, and this belief that, if we support each other, it helps the whole place. It like raises, the standard of living, the shared prosperity, builds a future for folks across our state and in our city. And so that accessibility, I think, can't be sort of undervalued, having been in the position of, trying to raise for and scale a company myself. But also, there's from that place of accessibility to folks in government. And that has meant lots of listening over the last, couple years about what we can do to even better support the growth of those innovation ecosystems. In the last year, the state launched an innovation fund, for example, to help provide access to additional funding and invest in some of our companies to help keep them here. One of our R1s, University of Michigan, is a top 10 school for patents. In fact, I think last year was second only to MIT. So there's incredible amount of research and cutting edge innovation happening out of those research institutions. We want to keep them here in the state and help them scale. So investing in our entrepreneurs across the state was a critical importance to our agenda, I guess, from a policy perspective. And that innovation fund was a really important step forward. And I think there's more to come in that regard. And I'd say there's just been a lot of growth in the innovation sort of hubs across the state. So Grand Rapids has grown tremendously in this area with organizations like The Right Place and others who the number of investors has grown tremendously. Actually, when the remote worker booms have happened and folks moved around a lot during the pandemic. I mentioned Traverse City inherited a lot of remote workers, many of whom are tech workers. And that's led to, I think, a lot more founding of startup companies in the northern Michigan area because it's so incredibly beautiful. People say if I could live anywhere, I'll pick there, and have chosen to build their companies there, which has also led to more investors and things like that moving back to the state in that area, in addition to the growth of Michigan's ecosystems. And we have great organizations like you could check out Michigan Founders Fund. You could check out, some of our big kind of investment vehicles, Invest Detroit, Venture 313. There's a bunch of different places you could go and check out in addition to Black Tech Saturdays, which we plugged. But I don't curious if y'all have others.
I just say in particular the space at New Lab, which is if you look up Michigan Central New Lab, you'll see it. It's actually a beautiful story. I would encourage you to look up Michigan Central's story because it used to be considered. I'm not going to say it. It's absolutely beautiful. And my great grandfather who came from Ireland through the train station, like we're, it's really important. That's where I office from now. My team offices there. You have an office there. It is a place of collisions. So I'll give you two fun stories because this is real life and we're being real. One day I didn't have childcare for my son and he's 11 now. And I took him in there and I said, Liam, just don't leave the building. You do whatever you want. Just don't leave the building at New Lab. And so I finished my call and I came and looking for him. I looked over the ledge and he's down on the first floor with a VR headset on his face, driving a car or a mobility innovation on the park in Roosevelt Park. And when I took him, away for the day, we went to dinner. He goes, Mom, I want to come to work with you every day. And I'm like, mission accomplished. But another fun story. So there's another company that I'm invested in called the Electric Plant Company. They just came out of stealth mode. So Hilary and I used to be neighbors in Indian Village. And so Justin and I got to know each other. Justin Mass, the founder, he's the former, he had his exit from Bloomscape, if you're familiar with that, speaking of pandemic. I walked by him at New Lab. I'm like, hey, what's up, neighbor? And he's like, oh, I want to show you what I'm up to. So he shows me his deck. And I basically got out my checkbook. I said, let's go. So look up the Electric Plant Company, total innovative use of technology and a nature-based solution. But there's that kind of creativity and that kind of collision space, which was the intention of Bill Ford when he bought the train station, is actually happening. That is where Black Tech Saturdays takes place.
Just cool, like hearing these stories of neighbors who are also doing these cool tech things. Darren Riley is one of my neighbors. Darren Riley of Just Air, an air quality monitoring startup that's just doing big things, continually expanding. I'd say we talked a little bit about some of the organic ways that this tech ecosystem is blossoming, right? Black Tech Saturdays being a huge one. But I think that state actors and other people who are really big in these spaces are also the ones making these connections. So it's not the separate enclave of tech entrepreneurs that the state hears about, right? We have folks like Hilary who are going and talking to these folks and bringing it back to work with the MEDC and with state leadership. And there's just this two-way two-way communication that I think is really beautiful. And then you touched a little bit on the Innovation Fund. Another way that the state is showing its commitment to this, putting leadership positions. Ben Marciona is the state's chief innovation officer, right? There is a dedicated person whose job is to think about these things and how we continue to bring innovation to the state of Michigan. Again, not just we have an amazing community at Michigan Central and New Lab, but all across the state. And so we have dedicated leadership positions whose job it is all day is to talk with senior leadership at the state level for how we can make sure that this is an industry that continues to thrive here. So I wanted to highlight that too.
Yeah. Just because you mentioned Ben, it made me think of Sky Specs. And they're an incredible company you could check out too. Because mobility, I think we have this incredible mobility sector also means air mobility and marine mobility and all these other things. They're doing cool stuff. We have this, road that charges your car. A bunch of other cool things going on here. It feels like to me how like San Francisco felt, when cool things. I'm not saying cool things aren't happening. I'm gonna stop talking. Okay. Detroit's great. So anywho, you can check them out too. So I don't know if there's other questions, but I have a couple more and then we can get out of here. But yeah.
There's one question. I don't exactly know. But someone asked about different like real estate development opportunities, right? Specifically multifamily development. Again, you guys aren't exactly like
we can shout people out.
Yeah, there's lots going on, so figure
totally
touch on it for
that
out. And he's from Troy.
Great. Well, hello. Welcome in the chat. So the question was about real estate development opportunities. And I actually think that's a great question because I think a lot of folks have it. When folks think about Michigan, a lot of folks are thinking about either home ownership or, flipping a home or renovating a home. In this case, we're talking about multifamily units and commercial development and things like that. But questions about, organizations and resources there. I already mentioned the amount of investment from a state level. It's gone into additional housing stock and things like that. That extends to, making sure that we're supporting to the extent we can development of that missing middle and affordable units across the states. The state's been an active partner in that. And then there are just like really innovative, very cool developers doing neat things, I would say, across the state. The person that comes to mind for me is Rod Hardiman. People know Rod, and you can check him out. But he's been so active in the community in so many ways and always ready with a really innovative idea and an interesting project. But yeah, curious if my colleagues have anything that comes to mind for you all. We're not real estate people, but yeah.
No, I mean, I look at the built environment in terms of, windows and energy efficiency, but there is a lot of opportunity there. And I think the housing crisis nationally affords Detroit a really unique opportunity for investing and retrofitting our building stock, which is aged. But one thing we haven't said on this call is how big the city of Detroit is, because I don't think people know. It's 139 square miles of city with amazing neighborhoods. So I would encourage you to look at the city of Detroit's website itself to get familiar with the neighborhood so you can understand the character. You live in one of the coolest. And I mean, mine's cool too. I'm in Rivertown, but the city could be a really great resource for anybody that's looking at real estate, also with the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation.
A lot of my personal experience is more on the micro side. Again, friends who buy homes, renovate them. They're still mostly single family, although there have been a couple, duplexes or quads that have been done. So I'm probably not the best person, but I will say, Kerry's point, Detroit is huge. There's a lot of space. There's a lot of space that maybe was once developed, but is not currently, and is ample opportunity for multifamily housing. I think that that's something that state priority is to build more multifamily housing. So I think that the appetite is there. I'm not the best person to talk to how you get there, but I'm sure if you, we can connect you to the right folks.
Yeah. Another fun crew that comes to mind, just for what it's worth, is Great Water Opportunity Capital. And the reason I mention them is because they're pulling new permits. So in addition to that sounds silly, but we have a bunch of new like skyscrapers going up here and commercial buildings and things like that. But we had so much housing that folks were renovating that we weren't necessarily building a bunch of new like single family units within city limits. That's no longer true because Detroit's growing, if you hadn't heard, and Michigan's been growing for years now. Go team. So all to say, they're a really cool team who's starting to build, in demand, units or in housing in dense environments that are walkable and amenity rich, which is what folks, of course, want. So, yeah, we're not necessarily real estate people, but happy to try to make those connections.
Maybe mention the Detroit Land Bank.
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
There is something called Detroit Land Bank and another program that the city's runs called Motor City Match. So those are things, again, you'll be able to find them on the City of Detroit's website, but I encourage you to take a look at that. I don't know how many commercial buildings are in the Land Bank Authority, but they do have both. You can start bid at $1,000, and they have some that are already retrofitted and ready for sale. So take a look there.
They definitely have multi-units and things like that that are a great place to start in a lot of neighborhoods that are really growing. Cool. Okay. Great. And we're close. I know that we've talked your ears off for like, a long time now. So I'll leave us with just, two quick things. One, any other kind of maybe myths to bust or common misperceptions or hidden gems, secrets that about our place that you want to share. And this is a dangerous question for me because it's like, I will write you a novel now, but I'm not going to do that today. Curious if you want to share any of that.
Yeah, mine is easy. Lake of the Clouds in the Porcupine Mountains. Google it, Porcupine Mountains, Lake of the Clouds. It's the most beautiful place I've ever been. And I've been to some places.
Yeah.
So let me know when you're going up there.
Okay, hidden. I don't know how hidden it is, but I think just as someone who, again, did not live in Michigan for her life and experiencing it, my partner is from Manistee, Michigan. It's a beautiful beach town on the west side of the state, northwest side of the state. And right on Lake Michigan. And anytime that I would go visit her and her family, I would just be in awe. Like, you grew up here? I mean, her house is 2 blocks away from Lake Michigan, and it's northern Michigan, so it still gets very cold in the winter. But we're able to do all the wintertime activities. You're also able to be in a beach town. Manistee National Forest is right there. So you go from this beautiful lakeside Michigan vista to being able to hike and walk around in this national forest and just experience the beauty that is northern Michigan in this tiny little town. And every summer that we go visit her family, I love it. I know Michiganders probably know Manistee, but those of you who aren't from here, go up there. It's very cool. Hidden gem, like in the city of Detroit, just for doing fun things. I'm a big fan of dancing and electronic music. And there's an amazing electronic music festival that takes place in Detroit, in Hart Plaza Movement. You should check that out if you're into it. But just in terms of being able to go out dancing, you can go from, there are DJs that play at some dive bars, but then there are actual dance spots. One of my favorite spots is Spotlight on the east side. It's just a great community space by day. And when I say club, that doesn't do it justice. You just need to come check it out. It really is a welcoming space with great music that plays. And I say this again, just for being welcoming. I'm an openly queer woman in a long-term relationship with another woman, and I feel safe here. That's just another thing I want to show. It's not a hidden gem per se, but I think some misperceptions about the Midwest. I knew when I was moving from very safe Boston, Massachusetts, I didn't necessarily know what I was getting into. I knew Ann Arbor was going to be okay, but at traveling outside of that, I wasn't quite sure. That was something that my partner and I openly discussed as well. Like, do we want to stay in Michigan? And the answer was just a resounding hell yeah. We both feel safe. It's something it's welcoming in that regard. And I realized I didn't touch on it before, so I wanted to do that now.
That's great.
That's huge. And I'll just echo, as a single parent, same thing. Like, I've never had an issue. I love living in Detroit, and I spend a lot of time out on my feet walking around. Another gem I can't believe we didn't talk about is the food scene in Detroit. Oh my gosh. Whenever I have someone coming to town, I use that as my excuse to like go try a new place because there are so many restaurants here. I like going to the old spots and the new spots, but I am blown away about the quality of the food scene here.
Yeah, my husband's a foodie. And so when we moved from Brooklyn, I think that was the thing. He was like, there was some trepidation there.
Yeah.
He was like, I wonder. And then was immediately a lifer because I think we had some really good tacos or something. He was like, sure. No, but there's just wonderful, wonderful food here. And like really incredible food from every culture you can imagine because we have like a really diverse population, whether you're going to Dearborn or the suburbs or the city or whatever. So love the food. Okay. Let me see if I have to answer the question, I suppose. Let me see if I have hidden gems. You guys named some of the good ones. We have Great Lakes, the second most ski hills in the country. I don't know if people know that. So if you like to ski, do that. I think one myth to bust, you mentioned it being cold sometimes. No surprise, we have 4 seasons here in the great state of Michigan. But I actually am finding that that is not deterrent for folks that I talk to more and more, in part because unfortunately, with extreme weather events and things like that, folks are dealing with really extreme heat in other parts of the country. And so, really to each his own. There's a wonderful place for everybody. And I think if you love it to be 115 for many weeks of the year, you can find that. And here you won't. We have beautiful summer weathers, and you can be on a lake any day of the week if you'd like. But also, I think just like really incredible infrastructure for a good time in the winter months as well. One of my favorite things is to go to Ema, which is this great ramen place in Detroit, on a really cold winter night when all the windows are steamed up, from making noodles. Just, there's a real, I think, beauty to being able to enjoy all 4 of those seasons here in Michigan. And because I can't help myself, I'll plug our sports for a second for anyone who loves sports out there. Maybe not a hidden gem, but Detroit is the best sports city in America. I'm just going to throw that down. And I think that almost got me kicked out of a cab in Texas once. But I do believe that. And if, the Lions obviously have had this incredible run, there are now, more people in America are rooting for the Lions than like any other team at this point because of their incredible story. And Ford Field is right downtown, as are all 4 of our major sports teams, and hopefully soon to come more. We have soccer stadium being built. There's a bid in, we hope, for even more. So all to say, I, as a basketball fan, maybe people don't think Detroit's the great place to be for basketball, but I will say the Pistons are now in the playoffs, everyone. So you can all celebrate. You can all celebrate with me today. And the best story in basketball, just broke an NBA record. We've tripling our win total from last year. I'm going to stop talking about this very soon. But it's relevant, I think, because not only are all those teams here and they're walkable, and you can walk downtown, go from place to place, eat, hang out, in this really wonderful downtown, but they're also accessible, like I was mentioning. So you can get in there and have season tickets and it doesn't break the bank, or you can go out one night with your family and buy everybody a ticket and, have a wonderful evening watching incredible sports, or, like I said, theater, or whatever else you love. So I'll end us maybe with that. Any final words from this crew? We laid it on pretty thick, but we meant all of it, and we could keep going. So anything else from this crew that you want to make sure you share?
Just come fall in love with Michigan like us.
Yes. Anything else? Yeah.
I chose Michigan, and you should choose it too.
Yeah. Listen to all these little t-shirts we're making. We're making t-shirts. Okay. So, truly though, I totally get that a lot of folks are in a position of trying to decide, what's next for them. And that's a big decision. Feel free to visit places first. And I don't know anyone who's visited our place and not realized that they love it. So I'm always big in encouraging folks to come and visit, because they are big decisions. But you can also, like I said, check out michiganlife.org. There's tons of resources available for you there. You can start talking to folks about potential jobs. You can start getting networked into the community. You can check out different communities across our state who could be your great place. Reach out to any of us in our respective teams, and we'd love to be your Sherpa on your journey back to the Midwest, or to the Midwest for the first time. So thanks everybody for joining today. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to event organizers, and we'll do our best to reply. Thanks everybody.